Ty was saying a good idea would be to start this tutorial off with just an intro to Figma, because that's what we use for all of our branding, and I think it'd be a really useful tool for everybody. So yeah, we're gonna do that. And basically what Figma is, if you don't know, it's a collaborative software where you can do design stuff, presentations, mock-ups, prototyping, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm just gonna do a really basic thing to start off, and then we can talk about branding. So yeah, when you make your Figma account, you're gonna wanna create a new team and give it a name, if my Wi-Fi works, and then you can add collaborators. Make sure you use like the Queen's emails of the other members of your team, but I'm just gonna skip that. And then you can choose education plan. That's part of why Figma is great, because if you're a student, it's free and you get all the same features as the professional version. So we'll do that. And then you'll get a project. This one's called branding. And then we can make a new project called, I don't know, branding tutorial. And then you get this, and then you make a file, and then you'll get your project. So because this is inQUbate, we'll stick with inQUbate branding and make the background color black. To change colors, you can just use this. They use a hex code system, but it's pretty straightforward. So there's that. And then to do the thing we're going to do, which is just make a basic frame. So these are the tools that you want to use up here. There's a frame tool, a shape tool, pen, pencil, text, movement tool, and comment tool. So to make a frame, you just hit that, and then they have all the different sizes of frames that you might need laid out already. So we can just use a desktop frame like this, and then you see it over here. And then once again, because it's inQUbate, we'll make it black, and then we can give it a little outline in inQUbate red, which is that. Change the stroke size, even bigger. You can do all this kind of stuff. And then this is changing the border radius. So yeah, so that's a basic frame. You can do that, and then you can make them bigger, smaller, adjust them. This is just really helpful, especially when you're mocking up websites. So then we can add some text. We'll change it to white. And then you can just see over here is where you add the font size and stuff. Make it like big, change the font. Figma has access to all Google fonts, so they have like a million fonts here for you guys to choose from. Make it bold if we want. We can increase the letter spacing. You can increase the line height. So yeah, so that's how you insert text pretty much. Pretty basic. You can center it. And then let's say you want to add like a shape or something. That's when the pen tool comes in. We can do something like this. This is not an urgent thing, but something that you can do nonetheless. Make the edges curved, give it a fill, something like that. And then that's sort of the basics. And then also if you want to add in an image, you can put that in here too. So I'm just going to go over here where I have my image ready and put it in. There you go. And then you can see like all this stuff all happened over here. If we want to make it into a group, we can just drag it around, hit Control G, and we have a little group, and that's our desktop, which we can name intro. So yeah, that's pretty much a very basic like thing that you can do in Figma. It's really scalable, but that's kind of all you really need to know if you're just like using it for collaboration right off the start. But you can get more into details of it. You know, there's tons of resources online and stuff. So now that we have this, I can look at the rest of our presentation, which is over here, and bring it in. Hello. Okay. And then something you can do is when you want to present or like show your mockup, then you can just press play, and then you will get it on the big screen. And that is how I will present the rest of this. So, okay, so now we can actually start on branding stuff. So throughout this, I'm just going to use like inQUbate's branding process as kind of like the example, just because I remember the process well. So yeah. So when you start branding, the most important things that you definitely want to start with are your brand's tone and your voice. So tone is essentially how you want your company to be seen by the public. It's kind of like, you know, what your values are, who you are, and this kind of goes along with voice, which is more the personality of your company, which will definitely greatly be influenced by who you are as people, and also just generally what your idea is. So something that you definitely want to do right off the bat that seems kind of cheesy, but it'll actually help you in the end, is making a voice chart, which is what this is. I just found it on a random website. But if you just list out some of the voice characteristics you want and what they are, then you can set out all together do's and don'ts for how you can continue to always make sure you're adhering to that voice. And having that consistency is really important, because if you're not consistent with your voice, it can kind of confuse your users. If sometimes you're being kind of funny and then other times you're being really serious, like it gets kind of confusing. So you want to make sure that you're being really consistent with that. And it's something like a voice chart can be really helpful for that. So yeah, the main things that are going to define your company or your venture that's going to help with the tone and voice selection process is, one, obviously your idea. Straightforward, what your idea is. And then number two is your target audience. So this can be both what field you're in, if you're in like banking or medicine or whatever, or just your actual consumer. I know that Callum talked about in a marketing tutorial about like generating user personas. So that kind of thing is really helpful for determining your target audience and understanding what your users want. So yeah, that'll also help define your company. And then of course, like I said, you as people, the creators of the company, that is also going to be really important, because you know you want your guys' personality to show through in what you're making, so it doesn't just seem like really robotic, and it's a little bit more personal that way. So a good example of a company that has really good tone and voice is MailChimp. You kind of see this a lot in the branding world. So they have fun stuff like their 404 error message is like a Sherlock Holmes reference. And, you know, they have social media tweets where they like post memes and stuff like that. So all that stuff kind of adheres to their voice, where they want to have a real sense of humor. And they've said that before. They've posted articles about their own tone. So this is just an example of like a kind of more funny one, but you can definitely do stuff like this, because it often lands really well with users, because when you see an error message like that, like you'll remember it later because you thought it was funny at the time. So yeah, so this is like the original inQUbate brand vision. Like I said, I'll use it as an example. So these are kind of the OG things. This is from our original brand brainstorm, which was a long process over the summer, but these were just some of the ideas that we want for inQUbate. And then if we go even further back, this was the original tone vision, which was passion, grinding with a smile, educate, having diverse perspectives and diversity in ideas, backgrounds. And we want to be self-starters, risk takers, and optimistic people. So yeah. Next is another super important part, as you can imagine, which is choosing your colors. So I'll talk a bit about color theory, because a lot of people just kind of will pick colors that they like, which is fair because you want to like your colors, but at the same time, it's important that they're meaningful. So just to start off, some of what the colors mean. Red is usually a more representative of passion, drive, energy, and power. That's why we chose it for inQUbate. It definitely represented those values a lot for us. Orange is, you don't see it as much, but it definitely is representative of joy, enthusiasm, creativity, and change. Yellow, you can definitely picture is like happiness, innocence, intellect, and sometimes energy as well. Green is more harmony, growth, education, safety, even sometimes. Blue, I've definitely seen, is associated with productivity, concentration, intelligence, tranquility. And then purple is luxury, ambition, and creativity. There's more meaning to these colors than just these, but I tried to like summarize what I've seen across like a lot of sources with those. So then once you pick like a main color based on this and based on what you like and your values and such, then you can get go on to making a color palette. So there's a bunch of different kinds of color palettes. I'll talk about three main ones. First is a monochromatic palette. This is what we use here at inQUbate, and it's basically you pick a main color like our red, and then you just have varying shades of that color. It's definitely the easiest and safest bet, but the only downfall is sometimes it can be boring if you don't do it well. But generally, like, it's kind of hard to go wrong with a monochromatic color palette, as long as your colors are really reflective of who you are and what you want to convey. Then there's a complementary color palette. So I use the inQUbate red again to show different kinds of color palettes that you could have chosen with this same color. So for complementary, you just pick a color that's on the complete opposite end of the spectrum usually, but it still complements it well. We all learned about complementary colors in grade 6 art. So that kind of thing is really useful here. So I chose red and blue, and then you can kind of fill it out with shades in the middle, in this case, an orange and a sort of turquoise, because that stops the user from having eye strain, stuff like that. Little things like that you always have to think about. And then lastly is an analogous palette. That's usually just like a main color and then a color that's very different from it, but it's still within the same hue. So here I did like red and orange, and then once again, filling it out with different kind of hues of the same color. Another example would be like having a dark purple and like a really light pink, like it's the same general color, but still really different and has a lot of contrast. So it's a little bit more consistent than a complementary color palette, but you know, it's not quite as monotone as a monochromatic palette. So yeah, when we were doing this for inQUbate, we went through a few different color palettes in this process. We tried a green, a purple, a blue, and then eventually landed on the red, which we decided was our best bet. So that was our own process with determining colors. Yeah, so then once you've picked colors and you've got your tone in mind, then you're gonna probably want to find some kind of font to use across all your documents and stuff. So not just your logo, but anything you produce, like your presentations, your social media, all that kind of stuff is all going to be really useful. So I found this infographic online that was very helpful for typography. And basically it just goes over the different kinds of fonts. So the main groups of fonts are serif fonts, which I usually think of as kind of like the Times New Roman-y kind of vibe. So fonts that look like this, and here are a bunch of companies that use serif fonts, so that's something to consider. Once again, when you're selecting ones like this, you always have to think back to, does it portray your tone and your voice the way you want it to? Then there are the sans serif fonts, which you definitely see a lot in the tech world right now, and they're really popular. That's what we use, and that's kind of my go-to for sure when I'm doing branding. The few times I have. So yeah, so these are some more examples like that. They're a lot more classic and basic, but they're really readable, which sometimes when you use a normal serif font, it's not quite as readable if you're using it for body text. And then last is a script text, which probably will be less likely to be used by you guys, but it exists, and here are a bunch of companies that use it. So yeah. Hello. So yeah, just a few examples of all those fonts for the various kinds, serif, these sort of fonts, sans serif, Lato, which is what we use, Roboto, Poppins, Open Sounds, Montserrat, they're all really popular. And then not in the infographic was also Monospace, which are those fonts that kind of just look like coding. So those, you know, if you're looking for a techie vibe, that could definitely be the move. We like to use a more techie font for buttons just because it's like, it's fun, basically. So yeah, here was our initial process. This is something I definitely recommend doing. Just writing out the welcome to, or just even your venture name over and over again in different fonts. And then you just like stare at them until they start looking not good. And then you just narrow it out that way. I looked at this page for a long time until we like narrowed it down to Lato. And then, oh yeah, this is just part of it too. We chose a few fonts, one for headings, one for body, and then one for buttons. Definitely a good idea to do. And then this is where we were for making our logo font. We had all the different kinds. If we wanted a tech, a simple, or simple with flair, as I called it at the time. And we ended up going with Poppins. After many meetings at very late at night, we finally decided on that one. Yeah. So this is definitely one of the most important parts. And I'm sure what everyone is gonna have a lot of fun doing, which is logo design. So a few things to consider when you're designing a logo is, once again, your brand voice and tone, because that is always number one considering factor in everything you do for your brand. And then also the various types of logos. There are a lot, some of which you probably won't use, but just doing your research, looking at different kinds of logos for inspiration, that kind of thing will be really helpful. And then also when you're designing, you definitely want to think about scalability and user experience. Is it a readable logo? If when you make it really small on your screen, can you still see it? If not, then you should probably make it simpler, that kind of thing. And just, are the colors good? Is the font readable? All that kind of stuff. So here are some examples of the kinds of logos that there are. I very much doubt that any of you will be using a mascot logo, but you never know. There's abstract like Pepsi, where it doesn't look like it means anything, but I don't know what, but I'm sure to them it has meaning. But the most popular ones in the tech world tend to be lettermark, pictorial mark, and word mark. So yeah, those are just some really basic examples of the kinds. Then, like I was saying about scalability, it's super important to have a logo that will scale well. So for example, I think the best example here is Heineken. Like, this is their full logo, but depending on the size of the screen or depending on what you're looking at, they can scale it all the way down to just being something as simple as a red star, which for example could be like your widget on a browser page. So that kind of thing is very important to remember. And it also means like these kinds of logos can start off complex, but then by the end, they're usually just a lot more simple. So yeah, that is something I'd recommend thinking about. And then like I was saying as well about considering your brand voice, your logo could be the same thing, but depending on what you want your tone to be, it can look really different. Like for example, this example of the wolf logo, like it looks really childish and it's like kind of cute. So you probably think it's like something to do with, I don't know, like a pet store, or maybe some kind of children's clothing brand. Whereas this one has a lot of really sharp lines and edges. So you might associate that more with being like a gym. This one looks like Firefox and has a really techie font. So I would just assume that's a tech company. And then this one, it looks a little bit businessy. So probably some kind of business logo. But yeah, so it's the same concept, but in 4 different ways. So depending on how you want your brand to be seen, your logo can look completely different. And there are tons of places to go for logo inspiration. If you go on Instagram, you just search logos, like you can look through all these accounts. There's tons of inspiration also going on Pinterest. If you just search up like even like medical logo or energy logo, like you'll find what you're looking for. Obviously don't copy logos that you see there, but it's really good for inspiration. So here's our process. It really started out from the beginning with drawing them on paper, which is definitely where you want to start. I had this idea of the light bulb because of ideas, and then the circuitry, and so we got here eventually. There was a lot that went into it, and then we made some digital mock-ups, just made a bunch of different versions, and throughout a whole bunch of meetings, we decided that this was the best, and then later decided the filled in circles were the move. And then we had this whole discussion where we talked about the full logo and all that stuff. So like I was saying about scalability, you can have just inQUbate or just a light bulb or both together. And then same with this. And then we eventually arrived here, which was the final logo design. And yeah, so that was fun for us. So this last kind of point isn't as important. It's more like a next step thing, but I thought I would share it with you anyways, which is considering your graphic style. So this more comes into play when you're doing a website, if you want to start a social media, or even if you want to do like document or presentation templates, like a pitch deck, for example. So if you want to think of like what kind of style graphics you want. So this is our kind of style of graphics. Yeah. And so this was the same thing. This is just an example of what we were doing. We had a social media. We wanted to do this kind of continuous flow with our feed. These are various templates, which we also did. Headshots, we decided on that kind of style, which is actually a good idea to do. And then that we wanted this kind of vector graphic 2D sort of style as well. So yeah, that was graphics. So I think that was everything I know that was a lot of information at once, but I will post this recording, and I can also post the slide deck. I have a lot more resources available, like links and stuff to pages on the internet, but you can kind of do your own research if you want. Yeah, that's pretty much it, to be honest. If any of you guys or any teams have any questions, you can definitely reach out. I'm down to help along the process if you need it. Yeah.
Just want to quickly say, like, looking back on this was by far, like, there was a long ass planning process, like, and just like inQUbate up for the year. This was by far the funnest part of it. Like, she's so right. There were so many like late night sessions where we were just like brainstorming, going through shit. So I really like encourage you guys to like have as much fun as possible in it, because I think this is the funnest part of like the business creation process. Like, I don't know if Leanna knows this, but some of the sessions I was not completely sober, and we were just tossing ideas out there. It was such a good time. So
yeah,
I'm
absolutely. It's a really fun time to do, and just all the constant meetings. But in the end, like, you're bringing your company or your idea to life, giving it like a personality visually. So it's a lot of fun for sure.
Thanks so much for doing this.
Yeah, no worries. Does anyone have any questions? Oh, I see in the chat. Oh, yes. Of course. No questions? Okay. Well, like I said, you guys can reach out anytime. I'm around. I've got my notifications on. So if you have any questions or want some guidance, I will do my very best to help. So yeah, thank you guys for coming. It's been real. All right. See you guys.